podcast.
Was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break. Was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break. That is Diamond David Lee Roth, baby, Diamond Dave. Oh, I say, mama, living ain't a luxury, no. Oh, I say, mama, and a little ain't enough for me. No, it ain't, baby. What a great lyric that is. Was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break. That is just David Lee Roth, man. He has just a style in his language, his lyrics, and in the way he speaks just more generally. There is something so freaking characteristic and just so cool about Dave Roth's language. I miss his podcast desperately. He hasn't done podcasts in probably close to a couple of years now. And even towards the end of the last chunk of the Roth show, they weren't his traditional episodes. They were very, very short. Sometimes they were just songs. A lot of times they didn't really make a lot of sense. Not that his podcast ever made a lot of sense, but in the glory days of the Roth show, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where he was doing 40, 50, 60-minute monologues on topics or just rambling, something absolutely mesmerizing about David Lee Roth's diction, about the way he speaks, about the way he thinks. And that lyric, was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break, just is symbolic. It epitomizes for me this interesting scat kind of style with which he operates in the world. And that was from A Little Ain't Enough, and that was the title track to the record A Little Ain't Enough, I think like 1991. And I forgot about that song. I totally forgot about that song. You think of David Lee Roth, if you think of him at all, post Van Halen, you maybe think of Just Like Paradise or Tobacco Road or California Girls, all great songs. And then later, as that whole vibe, that whole 80s thing was collapsing in the early 90s, he dropped A Little Ain't Enough. Great record, by the way. If you're not listening to that record, go check it out. Because David Lee Roth is summertime, man. And that song, Little Ain't Enough, is just the epitome. It's so happy. It's so carefree. It's so California. It's so David Lee Roth doing the splits. And the video is nothing but chicks in bikinis. That's David Lee Roth. That's the 80s. That's California, man. And that is the vibe. And I forgot all about that song, but I've got a temporary free trial of Sirius in my car. And so I've been listening to basically nothing but Hair Nation. A little bit of Ozzy's Boneyard. Too much Ozzy. And Hair Nation plays too much Ozzy. Like, there's too much Ozzy. Not that I have anything wrong with anything against Ozzy, but too much, man. So I listened to 90% Hair Nation, a smattering of Boneyard, because I'm waiting to hear King's X on there, because apparently they play King's X on Boneyard. And the Beatles channel, of course. Smattering of Howard Stern here and there, but mostly it's Hair Nation. And I'm having a great time with that, being reminded of stuff like A Little Ain't Enough by David Lee Roth. And my other observation of music recently, influenced by Hair Nation, is just how underappreciated Dokken is. How underappreciated Dokken is, man. Now, if you think about Dokken, about as much as you think about David Lee Roth, you probably know Dream Warriors from the Nightmare on Elm Street soundtrack. And what a great song that is. And they released a live record in the late 80s, Unleashed in the East, I want to say. And incredible. I don't know how much of it was overdubbed in the studio, but if you take it at face value, incredible. Live in Japan. And there's a live version of Dream Warriors on that album that's just stellar, man. And Dokken is underappreciated. They occupy this kind of weird, I consider them kind of a transitional band, Dokken, because they came along kind of early 80s, right? And their heyday was early to mid 80s. And they're a bridge band for me between the early 80s arena rock bands that were kind of ruling the scene in those days, your Journeys, your Foreigners, your Styxes, your REO Speedwagons, and the classic glam metal bands that would come along in the heyday, which was, say, 86 to 91 or so. Dokken occupies this kind of bridge position because in the early 80s, when what would become the glam scene was emerging, you had this period of time where it was Twisted Sister, it was Quiet Riot, it was Rat, Motley Crue came on the scene, and that was kind of a sea change visually and what it was all about. But they have a sound, at least at that part of the decade, which is different, I think, from the late 80s sound. And the bridge to that for me is Dokken, one of the bridges, because they came along early 80s with a sound that for me epitomizes the glam metal sound, and it should, because I think they were one of the creators of that sound. The way the riffs work, the way the tones are, and Dokken is so underappreciated for making some just really kick-ass rock and roll, man. Their riffs were not usually sophisticated. The riffs were usually very simple, but lip friggin' curling, man. You just dig into a Dokken riff, you know? You listen to Breaking the Chains or something like that. You can't help it. You dig in to a Dokken riff like that. And Don Dokken's voice back in the day was really, really good. Underrated singer, I think, at that point in time. George Lynch is not an underrated guitarist because everybody recognizes the wizardry of George Lynch. You know, he was one of the guys. He remains one of the guys. And you put that combination together, those riffs, voice, guitar, those choruses, and Dokken was great. And they were like at the very top for a minute. They were at the very top for a minute, and so deserves to be, and are largely forgotten now, or if they're not forgotten, they get kind of slammed these days because Don Dokken is still going around doing a version of Dokken, and he's not young anymore, and it shows. His voice got some wear and tear on it. A lot of what I've seen, he's kind of speaking the lyrics or he's singing them an octave lower, and this is the problem, and I've talked about it before, is that glam scene, that 80s rock scene, was so much about the high vocals, and the vocals so much carried that sound. And then when you get older and you're 70 years old and you don't have that vocal range anymore, the music loses its effect. And so a lot of people are bagging on Don Dokken for still going around trying to do it. I'm not going to weigh in on that. I'm just saying that my observations of Hair Nation since I've been listening are a little in enough. And Dokken, and I'm driving around yesterday and I'm listening to those songs, and, you know, go listen to It's Not Love. I think that's my favorite Dokken song. And it's not exactly a deep cut, but it's not one of the ones you think of first, but It's Not Love. And you just drive around and you hear those riffs and you just dig into them, man. You put your friggin' fist in the air. You can take on the world with a great rock song behind you, man. And this is the value. This is the value of rock and roll. I mean, David Lee Roth's Reckless Abandon and High Kicks in Summertime. And it's like the world can go to hell, and I'm still tapping my friggin' toes, man. The Tao of Mike Damone. And that is Roth. And it's like you can put up this front. Like nothing gets to me, man. I got pretty girls and sunshine. I'm tapping my toes, I'm singing my songs, and let it all go to hell beyond that because we're having a good time. And then you listen to It's Not Love by Dokken and you feel the power of those riffs, man. The power of a rock and roll song to just lift you up, just surge you up into facing. It's like reckless abandon and sheer fist-raising defiance. And these are the hallmarks of rock and roll, man. These are the hallmarks, this rebellion, either apathy or complete defiance of what's going on in the establishment. And I've needed it, man. I have needed it because This is Tuesday that I'm recording, which means yesterday there was an inauguration, and I do not want to make this a political podcast. I have no intention of doing that. There's the stuff going on in my personal life, and there are emotions attached to that, and music is such a vehicle for release. You know, you're staring at the inauguration of an administration, without coloring this too much politically, that could be a nightmare for the planet, an historic nightmare for the planet. And the bad people are not supposed to win, and here we are with Teflon Don, and you can absorb that and become very upset and angry about it. It's not supposed to be this way, and then you can go through what I'm going through in my personal life. You can feel those emotions, and they build up inside you, and you have to release them in some way. There are constructive ways to do it, right? Exercise, whatever. Playing the drums helps. Just putting on a song that moves you. You know, whether that's a sad song or a happy song or a jazz song or a bebop tune or some thrash metal, whatever it is that moves you. And what's moving me this week, Reckless Abandon and Sheer Defiance, the music of David Lee Roth and Dokken, just carrying me through. But these are, I don't even know what to say these times are. The world is inside out and backwards. The world is upside down. Everything we were taught to believe and that were our values and were our principles seem to be completely subverted and turned inside out while the crowds cheer along. And again, I don't want to turn this into an anti-political rally, and I don't want to color this with political discourse. But I worry a little, okay? As a student of history, I kind of take a look at what's going on. I look at the rhetoric. I look at this weird blind devotion that's happening. I look at Elon dropping a Hitler salute at the inauguration. I mean, I don't know what else you want to call that. He did it friggin' twice. And those of us who are history people, something twigs in the back of my mind, you know. And I hold on to was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break because there are two kind of quotes that seem to be uppermost in my mind over the past few days. One is the David Lee Roth lyric, and what is music but a vaccine? That's what I'm talking about, man. A vaccine is something that protects you, defends you against a disease or an illness. Carrying all that emotion inside causes disease and illness. It needs to be released. And music is a vaccine. Music is a release, a protection against those vile emotions and this weird energy that I've been feeling in the world ever since the pandemic. I don't know about you. I don't know if you think about these things or if you're smart enough to just move on with your life. I'm a chronic overthinker and an empath, and there's just been an energy in the world since the pandemic that feels off to me. I've not felt 100% comfortable since the pandemic was declared. And what I kind of feel going on in politics and in the political discourse and the public discourse does nothing to alleviate this sense I have of just an off feeling in the world. And music can be a vaccine, man. Music, it's just like Dave said, was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. It's like those of us who are really into music, those of us who rely on music not just for entertainment, but for a release and empowerment, something that stirs our soul, something that moves us, something that gives us balm, B-A-L-M. It's exactly what it is. It's a vaccine. And I'm recommending you use it as a vaccine. Whatever it is that helps you process your emotions, whatever it is that makes you feel good, whatever it makes you feel better in these really strange and potentially dark and troubling times, man. If music is that for you, then indulge it. Use it like a vaccine. So I got that as one quote that's running through my mind. The lighter side, the happier side, the defiant side, the reckless abandon side, the one that has a bit of hope and a bit of sunshine. The other is a quote that's somewhat more dark. Some of you may have heard it's been thrown around lately, and it's been on my mind. It was said by Sir Edward Grey, British Foreign Secretary, August 3rd, 1914. Britain has just declared war on Germany. Mobilization has begun across Europe. The armies are marching. And aren't the people excited about that? Sir Edward Grey, British Foreign Secretary, seems to be one of the few people who see what's coming more in reality, more for what it actually is. When the war was declared, people couldn't wait to sign up. People were pulling each other back and climbing over each other to be first to the recruiting office. We don't want to miss it. They said it was going to be over by Christmas. We don't want to miss it, man. We got to get there. We got to get at the Huns. We want to go on the grand adventure. And there were parades and people marching and flags and the bands were playing. The boys are marching. And off they went to the war. But as this was beginning, as mobilization was starting, Sir Edward Grey is in his office in London, and he's looking out the window. And down below him on the street, the guy's going around who's lighting the streetlights, right? Lighting the lamps. Going around, darkness is falling. And Sir Edward Grey murmurs to himself as he watches the guy working. The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. He's one of the few who at least suspected a world-ending carnage was about to begin. There was no over by Christmas. 4 long years and upwards of 20 million people dead and a world destroyed, not just physically in some cases, but a way of thinking. The Edwardian era, it was ended, right? The modern world was birthed there, and he saw that ending coming. And so he was not rushing off with his flag to join the band and to march to the recruitment office. He was looking at it with great, great sadness and fear and anxiety. The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. And so I have these two warring kind of concepts that have been going at me in my mind over the past couple of days. Was vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break. The lamps are going out all over Europe. And I think the place to be is somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. And I've been thinking about my own mental health, all right? Because the political situation down south, which is bleeding over into the political situation here, makes me angry. And I think I'm justified in that anger. And it makes me despondent. It makes me despondent that an administration can be ushered in that is, on the evidence, so cruel and so corrupt. And again, I don't want to politicize this because we get enough of this everywhere, and we're going to get enough of this everywhere. And one of the things that we need to do, I think, in order to preserve our mental health is to protect ourselves from too much exposure, because it's everywhere. And I follow on YouTube 2 or 3 or 10 left-leaning kind of citizen pundits. And this can be catharsis too, okay? All right, when Arsenal loses a match, which ruins my weekend, and I feel the anger inside that comes with that, going onto YouTube and listening to people rant on AFTV is maybe, from a certain perspective, toxic and can be. It's also a release. It's also a catharsis in a way. And so when you watch what's going on in the States, you watch Trump get away with what he gets away with all the time and the things he says and what MAGA says. And you need to process that anger. And one of the ways to do it is to go onto YouTube and listen to somebody articulate that anger and agree with you. The danger you fall into is that your experience of this and your experience of the opinions of this become very one-sided. I mean, this is the Fox News people, right? All you listen to is Fox News, then your whole perspective becomes the anger and the misinformation that comes along with Fox News. So it is, if you listen to nothing but angry liberal pundits on YouTube, then your perception of things becomes colored by that, right? There's not a balanced thing. And if you're going to be informed, you need in some way to maintain a balance. But if you're not going to lose your friggin' marbles, you need to protect yourself. You need to curb how much of that stuff you take in. You are what you eat. That is not just food. That is information. That is energy. If you spend all day being on YouTube just listening to angry people yell about one side or the other, even if you agree with them, you begin to absorb that anger. And I found that my own anger is flamed by that, right? Burning like a flame. Another great Dokken song. I find that my own intense emotions are intensified by absorbing other people's intense emotions. And what happens is you become yourself angry. You become yourself irritable. You become yourself self-righteous. You become yourself unwilling to entertain another opinion. And that's corrosive, all right? That eats away at you. And so it's like you need to release these emotions, but you also have to be careful about the manner in which you do it. It's a little bit insidious because you can be absorbing as much as you're giving out, right? And that creates a problem. And so my recommendation is, if you're upset, if you're frightened, if you're worried, that's okay. All right, feel that. It's likely justified. But try not to spend so much time in that fear and worry and anger that you become corroded by it, which means limiting your exposure to the news, probably limiting your exposure to social media. I mean, I've had to think seriously about social media because I follow people, and it's amazing to me how many of them are Christians who are over the moon about Trump being elected. And I still can't put two and two together on that. How this man is a symbolic for the Christian right. It just doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm not, again, going to politicize this. But it's like you can go and there's a person you respect as a musician, let's say, and then you see pro-Trump stuff and you're like, ugh. And you look at the comments and they're all rallying around Trump in the name of Jesus because he's their savior, which is idolatry, by the way, and wearing tampons on their ears and diapers. And you just think the whole world's gone mad. And it's like, I don't want to be exposed to that. And so you have to think about how much time you're on social media because that stuff is there. And it's weird. Like the day after the inauguration, when I opened up Facebook, the first thing I saw was a post by Mark Zuckerberg. I've never seen a post by Mark Zuckerberg before. And I opened up Instagram and the first two recommended accounts to follow were JD Vance and Melania Trump. What? It's like Meta has already bent the knee. You know, they're already beginning to push this on us. Is that what's going on? And I don't know. There could be other machinations there. Some people said it's just that Vance took over the vice president's account. And so whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is it's in your face. And it's going to be in your face. And there's going to be arguments online that you can get into if you want to that are fruitless and futile. There is releasing your emotions, and there is releasing them in such a way that only increases and intensifies them. So I'm saying curb your absorption of toxic rhetoric on one side or the other, whichever side of this you fall down on, all right? Try your very best, as I will try my very best, to limit your intake and be a little bit objective about it. There's not a lot you can do about it, man, which brings me to the next thing, which is I think all you can do is try to work on your own game. Now, I remember Jeff Thompson talking about this when he would get wrapped up in anger about greedy bankers or politicians or whatever, stuff in the world that rubs you the wrong way. So a lot of people get up in arms in that. And there is a time to march in the streets, all right? There is a time to protest. But if you're becoming one of these corrosive people, it's like you can direct that anger outward or you can work on your own game. And that's what he talks about. It's like the more cruel the world seems to be, the more generous and caring and sensitive I become, the more compassionate I become. And the more greedy the world seems to get, the more generous I become. And the more angry the world seems to get, the more peaceful I try to become. It's like you work on your own game. It's like Gandhi. It's like you try to be the change you want to see in the world. Doesn't mean you don't stay informed. It means you protect yourself. And then when you want to rage against something, you try to look at where that exists in you. Because I feel that, all right? Because I can see an angry MAGA person railing against the libtards. And my reaction to that is anger. My reaction to that is anger. And my temptation on a base reptilian level is to attack and to fight. I don't. But the impulse is there. And it's like, well, look, Jack, if you're mad at that guy for being angry, where's the anger in you? And what do you do with that anger, right? It's like this brings up a lot in yourself. And it's like, what can you do to be the change? What can you do to be the antithesis of what's out there? And corrupt regimes fall, by the way. Every corrupt regime falls. Okay, you can count on that. It's a historical certainty. The problem is that corrupt regimes tend not to fall peacefully. Right? And the question becomes how many people have to suffer along the way. I mean, Hitler fell in the end, and between 60 and 100 million people died in that process. It's like, how bad does it have to get? And nobody gets away from their karma. I know that's hard to take sometimes, but nobody gets away from their karma. And I'm not wishing karma on anybody, because what I would wish on others comes to me, because I have my own karma to be processed, man. But it's easy to fall into this way of thinking. It's easy to fall into a vengeful, angry, defensive way of thinking. And if you do that, the terrorists win. And so can you take these circumstances and be the antithesis? Can you turn it inward and up your own game? Can you be kind where others are cruel? Can you be generous where others are greedy? Can you have integrity where others are corrupt? I mean, that's big stuff I'm saying right there. All right. That is a lot that I'm putting on the line. And it's me seeming to accuse people of things. And well, if the shoe fits. I don't want to do that either. Again, I don't want to politicize this. I'm just talking about the way things are in the world right now and the way things feel in the world right now and how you negotiate that, how you navigate that in an effective way, in a useful way that just doesn't pull you down, down, down. The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. If you absorb that way of thinking about it all, what's that going to do to you? How happy is it going to be? And is it going to have been worth it? But can you think local? Right? There's huge national political stuff happening. There's a huge national political discourse that's going to become an international political discourse if it hasn't already. You can't hold back that tide. You cannot hold up that waterfall. But what can you do locally? What can you do that's a contribution, not even to your community, even more local than that? What is a contribution to your family? Right? What can you do to make your family the kind of world you want to live in? Right? Or your job, or your friend group, the people who are close to you. You can make this as local as you want. What can you do that's good? What can you do that's generous? What can you do that demonstrates compassion? What can you do that brings in an opposite energy to what seems to be prevailing? Which feels like a darkness to me. All right, sorry, I know I'm a commie and a pinko and a libtard, but it feels like darkness to me. I'm also an empath, and you can friggin' trust that feeling, all right? I hope I'm wrong, but it's like you can't change that, right? What can you change locally? What can you change in your own home that is better, right? That makes a sanctuary of that makes it a sanctuary for the people in your life who matter. Can you, instead of railing globally, up your game locally, right? Can you do that? And I'm going to say do stuff you like to do, especially now more than ever. I mean, that's good for mental health generally. Do stuff you like to do. Make time for stuff you like to do. All right. For me, that's pickleball. I'm playing as much as I can now that my shoulder's healed up. That's music. All right. I've got gigs coming up in February. I'm focusing on that stuff. I'm getting ready for those gigs. That's making this podcast. It's immersing yourself to the extent that you can in stuff that makes you feel good. Stuff that doesn't hurt anybody. Stuff that makes you feel good. Right? As an antidote to all the stuff you could be looking at and absorbing that might make you feel bad. Right? It's so important to carve out time to watch Netflix if that's something that brings you comfort, right? If that's something that relaxes you. To work out, to get outside. For F's sakes, get in the sun while it's out. It's frigid where I live in Canada right now. Frigid. But the sun at least is out. So open your friggin' curtains, man. Let the light in. Even if you're not in the room, let the light in. I swear it makes a difference. I swear it changes the chemistry. Do stuff that makes you happy. Do stuff that you enjoy. Listen to friggin' music. If you, like me, were vaccinated with a phonograph needle one summer break, and music is a balm for you, listen. Listen to whatever helps you release those emotions. Listen to podcasts. Make time to paint. Make time to write. Make time to go for a friggin' drive. Just do these things. Look after your mental health, all right? Do not absorb too much of the toxicity. Do not participate in the toxicity. Work on the parts of you that are the very best and most human and most decent parts of you. Do the things that make you friggin' happy. There's another quote that my friend Anne-Marie posted. Anne-Marie's a fabulous person. I've asked her to be on the podcast, but we never quite made it happen. She posted a quote recently by the author Michael Meade, and he's popular in spiritual circles and personal development circles. It says, "The way the world gets healed now is not by getting a good idea that everybody agrees with, but by more people awakening to who they are and learning how to give what they have come into the world to give." Damn it. What have you come into the world to give? This is probably the most prevalent question on my mind for years now. As I play music, as I was writing before, as I do this podcast now, it's like, what have you got in you to give? Talked a little bit about this on a recent episode when I talked about definitions of success, about having gone out and played shows might have relieved some suffering for the people who are in that audience, because we don't know their particulars for the most part. And I believe everybody's got something in them to give. I believe that people have come here to the earth realm, if you can stand me being that woo-woo, in January. I just think everybody's got something in them. Right now, I think one of the reasons that people become frustrated, become angry, become toxic, turn all of that outward into aggression, it's because they're not tapped into what it is they have to give, right? Nothing feels better than doing that which you feel you are meant to do. Whether you are a frontline healthcare worker and you are a person who is there to heal, whether you are a musician and your reason on this earth is to play music and use that gift that you have, or any sort of an artist or an engineer who designs really cool buildings, or an architect, or a banker, or just a frontline service person. I don't even, just is the wrong word, or a frontline service person whose mission, who's got this helpfulness to give, or a parent, or whatever it is. I think everybody's got something to bring to the table that they are here to give, that they are here to offer to the world, that's good and growing and helpful. And a lot of people who are not tapped into what that is just become bitter and angry because there's a piece of them that's not right. There's a jagged part of them that's not fitting in. And I've been there. I'm still there a lot of the time. Like, what am I here for? Like, what have I got to give, right? What can I offer to the world? I offer this podcast. I offer music. I offer whatever it is I do in my job. And are those the things? And I'd still continue to work through that. But that's maybe something you need to work through too, especially right now. In these potentially dark times, when stuff looks like it's going to go friggin' haywire, now more than ever, the world needs you not to hide, but to offer what it is you offer that makes it better. Okay? The people who are running the United States government have it within them to offer something that makes things better. They don't seem to be doing it, but they have it in them, and they've tapped into something else. Some other desire they have, and we'll see how that unfolds, And while I'm thinking about it, I don't want to be any sort of a negative prognosticator, but keep your eyes open for a Reichstag fire. 1933, Hitler ascended to the Chancellery of Germany. There was a president, von Hindenburg, but the guy who functionally ran things is the Chancellor. And in those days, the fledgling German democracy, born of the ashes of World War I, a lot of political parties, right? It's very, very difficult to form a coalition of those parties to actually get anything done. The Nazi Party was gaining popularity and had taken over a substantial portion of the parliament, right? And so Hitler, for political reasons, for coalition reasons, for expediency, was made chancellor. And then in 1933, the Reichstag, the German parliament building, was set on fire. And it was set on fire by a communist guy. And the Nazis came along and said, well, here opportunity knocks. It's the Reichstag fire. And so they turned that into communist elements were planning a massive revolution and overthrow of the German government. And therefore, we're imposing martial law right now to protect German citizens and to preserve the nation. Very, very patriotic, all for the common good. And they instituted the Reichstag fire decree. The Reichstag fire decree, which basically suspended civil liberties, suspended freedom of speech, suspended freedom of the press, suspended freedom of assembly, gave the Nazi Party authority to jail all of their political rivals without charges, right? So they rounded up communists by the hundreds, took them all out of parliament, which gave the Nazis a full majority, I think. They used this pretext of the Reichstag fire to make up a bunch of lies about the communist plot. The communist plot was a serious fear and a danger in those days. Right? This is the early 30s. This is after the war. Bolshevists and communists were seen as part of the backstab of the German army in 1918. I won't go into that now. Fascists are great at identifying public enemies for everybody to turn their attention to. Undocumented immigrants, for example, or Muslims. And the Nazis took wonderful opportunity here to fundamentally suspend democracy in Germany. Declared martial law, and there wasn't another election again until Hitler killed himself in 1945. So I'm not trying to be a worrywart, but let's just keep our eyes open for a modern version of the Reichstag fire. Don't want to be a fearmonger, okay? I don't want to contribute to the negativity. It's just those of us who have studied history, we just get a little tickle in the back of our throats, maybe. It's just the hair stands up a little bit on end. Not going to go there, all right? Let's eschew that for now. Let's protect our mental health in the time that's coming. And if you don't have any political worries, if you're not worried about what's going on in the world, kudos to you. Maybe you just got the winter blahs. Seasonal affective disorder. It happens. It's frigid here. You can't go outside. Your face will freeze off. Indulge the things that you like to do and create. I mean, that is the whole thing with the Michael Meade quote, right? Create. Whatever it is that you create, create it. The world needs your art. The world needs your music. The world needs your writing. The world needs your design. The world needs your kindness, your baking, your knitting. The world needs everything that you can create right now, right? The world needs examples. The world needs to know that there's still goodness. The world needs to know that there is still compassion, that people care, and that there are things that are still beautiful, you know? And so that painting of yours that you've let go of or you don't think is any good, paint it. Write the poems, write the songs, put them online, share them, you know, connect with people who are close to you, build communities, do all of the things that we want a government to do. Any government, whether that's liberal or conservative or whatever. We want governments that are builders, right? We want leaders who are compassionate builders. Be that, all right? Whether that's building a family or building a community or just building a painting in your little studio or a podcast in mine. Build your stuff. This has been kind of a long and winding ramble. I understand that, but I'm working from strange energy right now. I just hope that you're okay, you know, wherever you are, even if it's just the time of year. I hope you're well. I hope you're doing okay, and I hope you're taking care of yourself. Eat well. Exercise, sleep. Pay attention and indulge things that make you feel good. And for crying out loud, create what you can create and put it into the world, okay? I'm a working man, kids. I got to get back to it right now. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for the compliments I've had on recent episodes. I know that there's been kind of a subtle change of tone. And that's because there's been kind of a subtle change in me, all right? That is not deliberate. That is just me, I don't know, showing up differently because I've been sort of singed into being different, being a little bit more me. And that's not a bad thing, but it seems as though some of you are enjoying kind of the direction things are going these days. I'm not being remotely calculated about it. I'm just trying to speak my truth, man, as they say. I appreciate you listening. I hope you are well. Good things still happen when you put yourself out there, man, and we need it more than ever. We need you and what you do and what you give and what you offer. We need it out there, so please do it, all right? Good things happen when you put yourself out there, especially if you were vaccinated by a phonograph needle one summer break. Take care of yourselves, and hey, kids, I'll check you later. Yeah. Little ain't enough, baby. Baby, please.